music today is close to its pre-piracy peak for the first time in a long time, a testament to the growth adoption of streaming services by both labels and consumers. So streaming now makes up over half of recorded music's entire revenue. Pretty substantial. So just to give some quick stats on this, global revenue growth is at an 8.2% growth year over year. That's the fifth consecutive year of growth following the 2014 bottom, and streaming's share of revenue is actually 56.1%. So we're now eclipsed the 50% mark in the total revenue of recorded music. And of that streaming revenue, 42% is coming from the subscription revenue space, and about 14.1% is coming from ad-supported revenue in the free tier. Now, we've seen about a 24.1% growth in paid streaming revenues this year, 341 million paying subscribers, pretty substantial, but still some space. We've seen 22% in overall streaming revenues if we include the free tiers together, and paid streaming subscriptions have increased by 1/3 year over year. So looking at what's happening here, what would you guys say are the main drivers of this growth? Where is it coming from?
Overall growth, from the point of view we had at Deezer, was really from like the subscriber and the young subscriber. So the way the new audience are consuming music, basically, and the fact that now they are consuming music through their platform, and it depends, but so you have a lot of people consuming, young people consuming through free, of course, subscription, but a lot of also with paid subscription, and the fact that they are mainly this new generation who are listening urban music. And it's really where the growth are coming from this point of view. So I would say that, yeah, the main one are this between 15 and 25 years old, using the digital technology, of course, and the social networks, and who are like half between paid and free subscriber.
Well, when you said where are they coming from, I automatically thought of geography and geographical areas. And I think it's very interesting to see that the most recent increases in growth have been primarily in Latin America and also Asia, excluding Japan. And if you look at the map and at the countries, say Spotify or Tidal are active in, there's still a lot of blank map out there. So there's still a lot of potential for all the companies to increase further.
I also believe that more and more artists are aware how to profile themselves on the platforms, and therefore they are connecting more with more content on the platforms. That could be also a kind of driver of such growth.
Do we fear that there is a slowdown in streaming revenue or its rate of growth? Where else do we think the audiences are actually going to go to consume this content? Or do we actually think that there is just no more people, to sell music to?
It again depends on markets. I'm working mainly on emerging markets that I see a total different kind of consumption models and behaviors, and total different focus on different services. Back to your questions, but is that now some sort of slowdown in revenues? Yeah, because of the actual situation of COVID, but I haven't really seen something like really radical decrease in our ad revenues that I'm working with YouTube and YouTube related content from India till the United States with labels. And I see many different aspects of different increases and decreases in the platform, so I can't really generalize it.
Honestly, in the number of people who are going to subscribe on streaming, there are no slowdown, and it will keep on growing. It might be a bit slower in like a market with a high penetration already, like US or UK and Scandinavia. But for instance, in France, we still have a huge amount of people who are not on streaming. There are, of course, more and more different kind of subscription, like the family plans or duo plans, to also provide to users some kind of new way to be involved in streaming with their family or friends. And also, you still have a lot of people who are around like 14 and who might be able in a year to subscribe. So the more it's going to be, the more you'll have new people in streaming. And of course, you have all these more emerging market in the streaming industry.
At what compromise do we increase the fees to the consumer or whatever it might be in order to pay the artists and then potentially shrink the amount of total subscribers?
I think, we're all used to sort of VC-funded startups coming up, crashing, whatever. I think when you've got platforms like Spotify taking legal action to wriggle out of the increased royalties they should be paying by US law to writers, you've obviously got a problem. And I don't buy the argument that there isn't more wiggle room. A lot of the platforms have very unsustainable business models. I think it'd be a terrible idea to consolidate further, because the one pattern we are seeing with the streaming is that in quite a lot of organizations, you're getting a real sort of blandification, because it's encouraging very casual listening. There's nothing wrong with casual listening, but particularly if you're comparing it with smart speakers and people go, play me some jazz, okay. But what happens to more niche, unusual music that isn't so profitable in the new streaming model? In Portugal, what happens to fado? What happens to all these amazing genres?
It's visible, like all these services are struggling, with their profitability for many years now. It's like Spotify is probably 15 years old at the moment. And then what Terry just mentioned, that sort of moves of Spotify against this. And then we are watching, or we are seeing platforms going into and expand their formats of content that they are distributing, going to podcasts, audiobooks, videos. Hopefully more and more these formats can be monetizable, and more artists will get closer to these platforms and have more control on their not just presence and branding, but probably a little bit even more. They can upload more different kind of contents and probably generate more revenue source for the services as well, besides audio streaming.
So I have an artist starting today just distributing their first album. What percentage of their revenue, do they come to expect from streaming?
It really, as you guess, it really depends on each deal that you have, because it's you can't give a number, because every artist has a specific deal with his own producer, who has a deal with his own label distributors, so you can never say it's this percentage for the artist. What we can know is, as you said earlier, that there's a percentage that keep the streaming platform for making the mechanism working of the streaming platform, and then it give the other to the distributor. But then it's a question of deals, and so, as you say, as near now, it depends for each single artist. It's every time a different deal, different producer, etc.
I've been speaking to record companies about this, smaller independent record companies, and there just isn't a one size fits all, as Robin says, because somebody signed to a smaller label, the label may not take any cut as an act of generosity towards the artist. Some labels may take 60%, and then you've got percentages to distributors, and it all depends on if the artist is if it's a new album and a newer artist, on how big their existing fan base is. If you've got a big fan base already, they will jump on it. If you have to build it up, then you're not going to see much streaming revenue from your debut album. So it's very, very variable.
Always coming this question to me, that have artists ever been paid well after their sound recordings? You just mentioned this 80-20, or can we just tell that they've been anytime? And emerging indie artists with their first album, they probably will generate around, again, 50-60% coming from digital, that's for sure. A huge chunk will be YouTube instead of Spotify, I would say, if you are an indie artist right now, because it really depends how big is your fan base right now. And previously, YouTube gave way more options to connect you with your fans on their platform that Spotify did, and they just started their Spotify for Artists platforms and features and solutions for artists to reach better and reach strategically fans on their platforms. So I would say here probably this revenues coming from streaming side is really YouTube driven.
Would you say there should be a greater mobility of artists moving into independent distribution moving forward in order to sort of stabilize the economy a bit further.
I think anything that gives artists more flexibility is good, but there is a fundamental problem of artists not getting not getting their fair share. It's all right for your Adeles and your bigger artists. And what's very noticeable is that, for example, in the UK, some of the leading grime artists like Jamie and Wiley are keeping their music off streaming platforms or only putting it on much later because they want to sell physical copies. And also there's a huge new campaign which has been getting a lot of extra traction with the COVID-19 pandemic to fix streaming, and that's been set up by the Songwriting Academy, the IVAs, and by the Musicians Union. So there is a great re-examination at the moment of values, and I think that's not just in streaming, that's not just in music. I think that's in every aspect of our economic and personal lives at the moment, and I think that is where there may be a lot of changes to be seen.
As you said, I think it's what is great in 2020 is the fact there are so many different options for the artists compared to like 30 years ago. And yeah, us at the Orchard, the idea is like to give this boost to the artists and to work with them on their marketing strategy, on their innovation, on the pitch to the platform, on the artistic aspect if they want to, and the fact that more and more now in 2020, artists are becoming in a way more independent than before, because through the social network, they are more able to connect with some video makers or other people. So they are like sometimes in crew, and they not necessarily need all the work from a label from like before. And the fact that they want also to be the owner of their music, that you can still be when you only work with a distributor, even if, for instance, the Orchard can be really involved in the development of the artist in different way, but the artist is still the owner of this production. And we can see that there are more and more artists that are keen to be in this way of working, being at the same time independent, but on the other hand, to be working with professionals of the industry.
Regarding streaming, and if you would choose a DIY distributor instead of going to a little bit, I mean, like bigger ones, they have probably more direct and personal contact. I really do believe that you as an artist need some sort of help and some sort of human interaction from a distributor in long term, if you think in long term, or if you think really seriously that you want to reach as much as you can related to one single platform. Right after you, as you're an independent artist, has just spent lots of time to understand how each platform works and what sort of techniques and methods you can do to optimally manage your rights there, or optimally maximize your revenues on each of these platforms. So it's a massive amount of new expertise you have to pick up as an artist. So artists have to be everywhere, and they have to know kind of everything, how they can grow and how can develop on all of these platforms. So DIY is a massive challenge, is a beautiful way, is a massive challenge.
Who has the biggest negotiating power at the table to change any of this?
Artists and fans. I think whilst record companies have the potential to change the deals and the proportions and the percentages, artists are the ones with the power at the end of the day, and they can encourage their fans to do something, whether that's follow them somewhere, take up some different platform, do stuff on Bandcamp. And I think it's very interesting that dialogue through digital has become much more close, much more enabled, and artists can take their fans somewhere else if they want to. Not in all cases. I mean, Spotify is not brilliant at sharing data with artists, and it's one of the things that's very important for a platform is to enable artists to have access to the fan data. But we know some of the biggest artists like Taylor Swift and Pink Floyd have had issues with platforms, had music on or off. And at a much smaller level, there's a band called the Orioles who signed to Heavenly Recordings in the UK, and they were talking about the tip jar on Spotify. I hope we'll be coming to that at some point. And their fans were begging them, no, let's do something on Bandcamp. So I think artists have that power, and I think increasingly they are organising, and collaboration between artists is, potentially a huge, powerful thing.
I do believe in the power of artists as Terry does, and however, what we've seen right now, I mean, the biggest power comes from the collecting societies, author and composition related right holders and their agencies, and they could probably reach the furthest point so far. How this would change with time or could be changed, it's like the massive amount of interest of the majors in it, so it's pretty difficult.
What have we seen, happen during the Corona crisis in the streaming world that you guys sort of, what are the pluses and minuses, I guess, during this period of time?
Myself as a person practically preaching about the music-related digital and online content and how to produce those and for multi-platform activation. The last 2 months was actually the golden era of digital-related music content for me. And it was great to see so many creative ideas with limited resources to do some really nice things. Live streaming, of course, a boom, and such softwares that we are using here right now. And the question how to monetize those, it's raised as a question, and probably put a challenge to services and some sort of, I don't know, I hope a competition for the artists that they would be able to monetize this content even more. I mean, live streaming as well.
Of course, we've seen like a decrease at the beginning, but also way people were consuming music, which was different, but also in a way not different, because the way they listen music was really a way they've listened music before during the weekend. So during the weekend, people are less listening music than during the week. And it was a bit like this at the beginning of the crisis. Having said that, a positive now solution that the platform have put forward is also the localization of music. And it's also something we are, as the Orchard, working, is the fact that we are more and more supporting the local heroes, because it's also what is since few years trending in the way people consume their music. They want to find it's more related to urban music and local music. And the fact that also we have more and more music traveling, and we have more and more like K-pop or reggaeton who can be bringing to another country, and it's accelerating that. Also the fact that you can still discover music through your own.
It's been a very rocky road, we know, which is that streaming's been dropping because people aren't making their usual gym visits and their travel to work. With a little lift from people working at home who may be streaming more. But I think what's absolutely clear is that there are a bunch of very devastated artists, not including my cat, who have seen their income totally dry up. And the argument that streaming is good for you and that it's a shop window and you can make money in other ways now just absolutely doesn't wash. And in terms of live streaming shows, that's very variable. People aren't used to paying money. The fact that there is a tip jar on Spotify is being seen by many as an admission of failure, that it doesn't work for so many artists. And I firmly believe it's vital that artists should own the technology they use.
I mean, if we really look at like the IFPI report come May of next year, are we from the recorded revenue side of music, are we going to see a significant decrease?
I think it will increase in all the digital aspects, but of course, as we have the live aspect, which is super big in artist career, it will depend country by country how the live is coming back. But of course, because of this live miss for many months, at the end it might be a decrease, but maybe there are some solutions. For instance, in France, there are the SACEM, so for the rights of the artists, who say that they are going to generate revenues when you have a live from YouTube, for instance, depending on the number of views, etc. So maybe the digital live could be a way to generate your revenue in different countries, but of course it will be small, but at least it's a new way to create some revenues.
I think there's going to be massive change, and it's going to be very difficult for a lot of different music companies, because we're going to be heading into great economic troubles, no matter what country you live in and what government you're under. And it's very, very hard to predict what's going to happen, but we may find that companies are getting the plug pulled because the VC investors just aren't going to pump any more in to keep them afloat. I think we will have a very, very different landscape next year.
My revenue is coming from digital sources. In the last 2 months, I haven't seen such radical drop or decrease on the revenues. But yes, of course, it will be probably a decreasement of revenues related to this few couple of months. Hopefully this won't return for us again this year.